Hello, everybody. This is Nathan Lee with Life is Art. I am sitting with artist Demetrios Papakostas, and we are talking a little bit about his work, and we're also getting to know Demetrios as a person. He is currently having an exhibition on November 9th at 1515 Lincoln Gallery. So if you get a chance to come out, I had a sneak peek of it, actually. I went over to the gallery, and I saw Patrick. He was hanging the show, and I was picking up some mail. I said, well, let me go on ahead and get a sneak peek. And that, I like abstract art, and we'll get into that later because I've had a fixation with abstract painting. It's the one thing that I've never been able to do successfully to where I feel comfortable with it. And at some point, I want to talk with you about that. So Demetrios is from Canada, and he's all the way in Oklahoma. Can you tell us what brought you to Oklahoma? How you met Susan?
I met Susan through a friend that did some video work for her.
Okay.
For her. And he sort of, I was talking with him because he's also a friend of mine, and we get together sometimes and just chat and talk about art or whatever, our family and art, everything. And I mentioned to him that it would be nice to have some kind of representation maybe in the States.
Nice.
And he said, well, he goes, as a matter of fact, I do work for this lady that's just currently in the process of opening a gallery in Oklahoma. And would you like me to get in touch with her? And I said, oh, for sure. I mean, why not? So she did. She got in contact with me. I sent over my work, and she liked it. And she asked me if I'd like to be represented by her. And I said, sure, why not? And that was about roughly 2 years ago or so. And she asked me if I wanted to do a exhibition. So here I am after many months of planning and everything.
That's very cool. Susan, for those of you who don't know Susan McCalmont, she is the owner and CEO of 1515 Lincoln Gallery, and she's a very good friend of mine. As a matter of fact, she gave me the opportunity to be an artist in resident here, and I'm loving the space. I get to meet creative people like Demetrios, and it's been great. Your show right now, could you tell me a little bit about the work?
So the show is called Along These Lines, and it's basically I would say my thought process at the moment, which is I was thinking a lot about how our lives start off one way and end up completely in another, and how sometimes we think this is our path through life, and it gets altered by an event or change of mind or whatever that might be. And along these lines is basically how we have barriers in front of us and how we can overcome them, go around them, go through them, and just persevere and just keep moving forward. So, and that's it. It was a little bit of that. That was my thought process at the time when I was creating the series.
Now, I noticed that your work is primarily abstract. Did you move towards abstraction, or have you always been an abstract artist?
I have mainly been an abstract artist all my life. I did do some portrait work early on, I think in school as well, take portrait classes. And then my first foray into art was a watercolor course. And thinking that, okay, watercolor is pretty easy, that's what I'm going to start with. So it wasn't the easiest thing to do.
I still can't get watercolor.
Yeah,
it's a difficult medium
because when you lay down the water, you sometimes just can't control it as easily as you think. But it also gives you some nice surprises. So anyways, I started with that, and then I kind of just started working on my own in acrylic, doing kind of like my first sort of inspiration was Mark Rothko. So I tried to emulate some of his color fields, but I turned them sort of more into abstract landscapes, I would say, like dark skies with a line of light and maybe a dark land mass. And I was playing with that for a long time. And it just grew that I also liked hard edge lines, architectural features. I would often look at buildings that were, Art Deco or whatever the style. I don't know all the styles by name, but I kind of like those hard edges, the corners, and what they gave and the shadows. So I started to experiment with just doing straight hard edge abstraction, and I really liked it, but I had to sort of because at one point I was going back and forth between abstract landscapes, and then I would try a little bit of hard edge geometric paintings, and then I would be like, no, I don't know what I'm doing, so I'd go back. So it was like a comfort zone, getting yourself out there kind of thing. And then eventually I just said, you know what, I really want to do it. So I just committed. I say I'll commit a year to just doing geometric abstraction, hard edge work. And so I put everything else away and I just concentrated on that and never looked back since then.
Now, there are abstract artists that do non-representational work. Sometimes it's, merely the exploration of color.
Right.
But when you mention that your work explores ideas like the trajectory of a person's life, I can kind of see that in the work because directional, the hard lines, the clean lines, the idea of a person's trajectory. Your life as an artist, I would assume that came into play as far as subject matter and talking about how sometimes your life takes all these twists and turns.
Right.
And that's something that I find very, very interesting about your work. It seems like it would be harder to convey that. When you make a piece, does the piece tell you what it's going to be, or do you have a preconceived notion if you're going to do something on a particular topic?
In a way, it's always for sure on the back of my mind that I have this sort of barrier that has to represent what I'm talking about. And I do a lot of sketching in a sketchbook, and that includes color studies and just overall aesthetic, what it would look like, and a lot of times it's just a starting point for me. And when I get to the canvas and I finally lay down some color, I do find that I have to change sometimes color, sometimes shape. But it's all part of the process, and I'm not rigid in the way that, it's got to be this color or else I'd be out of canvases in a big hurry. And it lends itself to exactly what I'm talking about, which is twists and turns of everyday life, and it shows in the work, I believe.
Well, I love work that has a narrative, just as far as a personal preference. I can appreciate non-representational work, but I read a lot.
Right.
I write a lot. So when I come across work that has a story, I love to know the entire travel of that piece, that process, the person behind it. And I think human stories, because I think about all the things that disconnect us in society right now.
Right.
And when you... And here I am, I'm thinking that art is, and I always do this, I don't mean to get on a soapbox. I did that with Cherry when I was talking to my good friend Cherry. But it seems like art is like the final frontier to where there is a chance for people to be connected by things that they can relate to. And the human travel as far as where you were and who you become in the end is something that I think all of us can relate to. Well, those of us that grow up,
Right. Absolutely.
And Tell me a little bit about your travel, and how you arrived at even being an artist. Were you well supported? Did people even?
Not particularly. No, my parents were not very supportive.
What did they think about you being an artist when you made that announcement the day you're like, "Hey, I'm an artist"?
I kind of just started doing it. I wasn't really I didn't announce anything. I was working for family business, which was for my dad basically, and I thought that was the way to go. And I really did it for them because they were getting on in age. So I sort of said, okay, it's up to me to keep this business going and the whole thing. But I always had in the back of my mind this creative juices that had to get out, and I would supplement that by taking night courses, drawing courses, mostly in that way. I never went to school formally for or get an education for art.
So you're a self-taught
I'm a self-taught taught artist, yeah, and I basically learn on the fly. I have to apply myself to learn how to do it. For instance, a very simple thing would be learning what kind of tape works best on hard edge paintings, because some stick more, some stick less, some let the paint bleed underneath, some of them don't. I mean, just that, and I think I finally found the right tape after so many years, which is a big deal when you're doing hard edge abstraction. So I wasn't very well supportive, like I said, from my parents. My father, being an immigrant from Greece originally, thought that you can't make money from art. You have to be this. You have to be a lawyer or an architect or whatever, some profession, because they came over from their country and they didn't have a lot of skills and they had to work hard, day in and day out and just grind and, find a way to survive. So they wanted obviously a little bit better for us, for myself and my siblings. But, I always, like I said, I always had the creative juices in the back of my mind. And, I did graphic arts for a little while. So I was always dwelling in all these creative things just to keep my sketching all the time, but never taking it to anywhere else because thinking that, well, I'm never going to do anything else with my art,
The one thing I think all artists, and, listening to you, it's a familiar story, and I don't think artists have answers to it. You want that support from people that love you. Absolutely. And people that you love. But sometimes it seems like you have to build a creative family, elsewhere. It's not that they, your family hates what you do, but they want the best for you. The practical world and the creative world, which, artists dwell in, right. Have you figured out a formula of how to balance that kind of life? Because the thing is, we create just to create. We may wake up on the fly and we may spend hours on something. Yeah. And the payoff for it is that it was created.
Right.
And the practical person is always like, well, you made it, so what? What is it for? How much is it worth? Who bought it for? Absolutely. How would you explain the value of art to a I've had to come up with my own version of it, and sometimes it leaves head scratch, people scratching their heads. Right. But that conversation comes up often. Because a lot of those financial potential avenues of assistance come from a very practical world. So how do you speak to that person to get them to understand the value of what you do?
I think the best way that I could give you an example, when I met my current wife, she didn't know anything about art. She was not even interested in art. So when she saw, all these paintings all over my apartment at the time, and, and so she got a little curious, and I kind of explained how, you basically have to educate somebody that's interested or a little interested in what you're doing. I think the overall is that the aesthetic is showing them that why this is important, even though it's geometric or it's a landscape or whatever it is. And I think that's the first thing, is educating the public, trying to sort of make them understand that art is not about what you see, it's also how you feel about a piece. It might attract you, and you might not be attracted to all sorts of art. You could only, you might like hard edge abstraction, minimalism, or a traditional landscape, for instance, or a portraits.
I find that most practical people are attracted to art and they don't know it. It's a very subliminal and subconscious thing.
I think people are like sort of afraid of art, I would say.
Well, it's intimidating in certain instances because where is it at? It's at normally at a facility, white wall gallery. Very, very clinical.
That's right.
And there's people that I know that started collecting and they're like, well, I'm not an expert on art. They don't realize that it starts with their own personal opinion, their own preference. And they're more likely to approach, I think it's easier to approach an artist individually than it is to approach an institution for art.
Yeah, but at the same time, I think also it's important for somebody is slightly interested in art or wants to know more about art. I would say visit a whole bunch of galleries, a whole bunch of museums, and just look at the work. And you'll see what appeals to you and what doesn't. And I think that's the first step. And then from there, you could seek out small venues, galleries, talking to the artists themselves, getting to know them, getting to know their work. And I think that's part of it also as well, is getting to know the artist as well. It's important, and you kind of feel what the artist is presenting, and I think that's where the support comes for the work.
Now, was your wife versed in anything as far as the creative field, or that's interesting?
Not at all. No, she had no inclination of art. So here comes this artist that she wants to date. And I'm like, yeah, and this is like, and then I put, these colors, and she's looking at me like I'm an alien from another planet. But eventually she got her own voice, and now she's able to tell me, well, that's not nice. I don't like that. Oh, I don't like these colors. Oh, that's really cool, And so it kind of surprises me. So,
and she understands the value of the work beyond the monetary value. I think that's very difficult, especially. We've had discussions as friends. How do you love an artist?
Yeah.
Oh,
how do you love an artist?
Yeah, because I even give a disclaimer, And a good friend of mine said something that was very significant. He said, there are people, and here we are, with what we do here,
right? We
go in all kinds of directions, and it's simply a conversation. But we were talking about how sometimes our significant others look at us as almost alien when we're in that zone.
Right.
Because an artist spends 1 foot in their universe and 1 foot in the practical world, and it seems like we're daydreaming all the time. But a lot of frustration that people, near and dear to me express, and it's never a matter of love. People love each other, but you have quirks. And I think a lot of people confuse a business person with an artist. And I even had a friend, he said, well, I had to tell my partner, I'm an artist. A business person is something completely different. And I think the frustration comes from, there are people that want to build you. They want to help you grow. Right. And in their minds, growth is money, monetary. And that's not necessarily the realm that we deal in.
You can't equate art with money. It just doesn't. Those things are two heads that want to clash.
They do.
And I believe an artist's. I believe most artists are in it for the art, not for the money.
Yeah.
and you do get the artists that are kind of, they create things that are easy to like.
Yeah.
I mean, you can do 1,000 portraits of Marilyn Monroe and you'll probably sell them all, you know. But when you do a completely random abstract piece, people are wondering what the hell it is, you know. And it's also that. It's also the fear factor in a client or a person, a non-artist, looking at work and not knowing what it is, and that's fearful to them because, you know, or they equate it to, oh, that looks like a Picasso, or that, you know, they always equate it to
something else. Yeah,
that they might have known, you know, have seen art. So
well, it's a familiar point of reference.
Yeah, my friend, hey, Picasso, how's it going, Picasso? I said, I'm not Picasso. I wish I was Picasso. That's what I tell them. But all those little factors mean that it's generally a good way to, you know, introduce is art is education, educating the public, educating a person on why you use those colors and why you're doing what you're doing.
I think you have to make it safe for them.
Yeah,
you know, you have to make it very safe and not to make a potential collector or a potential appreciator feel stupid, because they go in feeling stupid in the beginning in the first place.
Because artists are artists. They don't, you know, they can't sometimes explain their work, or, you know, they can't understand why you don't understand what they're talking about. You know, but I mean, once you become a collector, there's no going back.
No,
you know, I had a client that bought a painting from me. And he actually came into the studio. He was a CEO of some company, so I think he was looking for art for his new home. So he came to my studio on a Saturday morning, and we were talking for hours, just chit-chatting about life and art. And he was a fairly new collector. And, you know, he turned around and he said, okay, I think I'm going to take these 5 pieces, which was mind-blowing, you know, because I never thought he would do that. But then, like, I called him back about a month later just to see hey, how's it going? Are you enjoying the art? And he said, oh, I'm at a gallery. I'm looking for art. And I got to let you go. I'll call you back. You know, so he's like off and running. He was like, just, you know, that's it. The floodgates open, and he was going full-fledged. So good for, you know, I guess it's good.
Well, you live in the realm of, I'm assuming, because you're showing in galleries, you are living in the world of the business of art, and that is a completely different animal. I remember speaking with a friend. You know, it was I told her, I said, well, the magic ends in the studio. And the moment you decide to share your magic for a monetary reason, you are officially a business person at that point. When you made the transition to being a business person, was it a difficult balancing act? Because the difference between going to work at a 9 to 5 is you're giving a service that you're not giving it a piece of you, like a physical piece of you. It's just an action. You do this, you do that, you go home. Did you have a difficult time parting with your work?
I think in the beginning you do, as a new artist. Most definitely.
Why do we have that difficulty?
Because I think it's something so new to you. As a new artist, you create this piece, for instance, and you're thinking it's the best thing in the world. Like, you know what I mean? Like, oh my God, like I could never get rid of this, because you're so proud of what you've done that you just don't want to part with it, you know? But if somebody comes along and says, hey, you know, I'll give you $1,000 for this, then it makes the mind start to think, like, you know, and I've known artists that have pieces that they don't want to sell, and that's fine. If you create, let's say, a first of a series.
We just got through talking about a piece over here. You asked me, what if somebody wants to buy it?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Exactly, you know. And that's another thing, is that we always are not really sure where our art is. Where does it stand? You know, because you say, oh, it's just a piece from my home. I just created it so I could put it up on the wall. But you know, that's what you think. But if somebody else will see it and say, my God, that's an amazing piece. Like, wow, you know, how much do you want for it? You know, which you're thinking like, wow, I never thought I would ever sell that, you know. and that's happens to me a lot. I create pieces and I'm like, no, I don't know. And then people come in and like, oh my God, that's fantastic. What is that? And I'm always surprised, and you can never know what someone will think about your art. So I think your job as an artist is just create and let others decide what is good and what is bad and what sells and what's not, because you just don't know.
Well, on that note, we're going to take a break. This is Life is Art, and I am having a great conversation with Demetrios Papakostas, and we will be right back. I am back with abstract artist, Demetrios Papakostas, and we just had a laugh. We had a really, really good laugh about some of the funnier things in art. We were, and I think I talked with Cherry about this in the last one, as far as it might have been Cherry or it might have been Paul. I can't remember which, but the banana that was taped to the wall. There's the eyeglasses that were found in the gallery and all that. So, but we were kind of talking about knowing what makes art art. And it was interesting that artists have a certain understanding of the context of what they do. They don't always have to make something look like something in order to understand that it's conveying an idea. And there's a big difference between a brushstroke on a canvas and a brushstroke with purpose. And I thought it was very interesting, especially since we're talking with Demetrios as an abstract artist. And I'm getting off a little bit of where I wanted to go with it, but it was, we got to have a laugh over that. So I'm going to go in the natural direction of the conversation. Do you think that art has gotten so subjective that it has become difficult for people to take it serious in the same way that they take other endeavors? Because we're always smashing the rules. Every time we look up, we're smashing the rules.
Mm-hmm. I think we have to continue smashing the rules. I think it's very, very important.
You think it hurts us or helps us? Because it's like, okay, well, if that banana on the wall can be...
Yeah. I mean, the more obscure idea you have as an artist, you got to get it out there.
Yeah.
I don't think you can stifle that creativity or the energy. And, living in these times, we are often stifled, or we're made to feel bad for us thinking a certain way or saying a certain something, being outcast right away, judged. And, they should just hang us already.
I think some of the best work has been outcast work, when you,
absolutely.
And it becomes great after the artist is dead.
And as much as you might like it or hate it, it's the artist's vision, and you have to respect that, I think.
I think so, too. I definitely have a preference for the kind of work that I like, but I also recognize something, which brings me to what I originally wanted to talk with you about. But that was funny about the paper clips, the bananas, and when an artist is making this work, somehow it's finished. Mm-hmm. And as an artist that makes, your work is very strong, but it's the components of it, you can recognize it immediately. The lines, the there's not a lot of curvature to it or things like that. Yeah. When you're working as an abstract artist, I think it would be more difficult to figure out when you're finished. Mm-hmm. When do you know that a piece is done?
I think, well, first of all, you start off with an idea, mm-hmm. and it's oftentimes, yes, those ideas change as you proceed with your work. But when you get it to a certain point where it looks a certain way and it the colors are right, then I tend to say, okay, it's done, and I think that comes also with experience. Like, mm-hmm. the more experienced you are as an artist, the more you're sure of what you're working on, obviously, and and you know when it's done and when it's still needs to go on. Like an unsure young artist will oftentimes be unsure about their work, and they'll just go back and forth, and a lot of times they'll mess up their work. And I mean, I still mess up. I mean, I still think, oh yeah, this is the greatest thing, and then 2 days later it's like, oh, that sucks. I gotta work more on it. I gotta do more. There's something more to it, and that's also a little bit of an instinct that you have as to what. But overall, though, the more experienced you are as an artist, I think the more you know when a piece is done, and I've just learned to kind of just leave it, and that's it, and I usually tape around my around the outside of the frames of the stretchers, and when I lift off the tape, that's it, it's done. I'm not going to work on it anymore. So that's my kind of cue to say it's done.
It's hard to not overcommit to overworking on a.
Oh yes, for sure. I mean, I've destroyed a lot of canvases.
Yeah.
But I've learned to do that also, to just let it go. It's not working, let it go, start a new piece, just change the direction. I think that's the best way to do it. Not because you're fighting yourself, you're fighting the colors, you're fighting everything is just, and it's not going to work. So I've learned to, I have about 5-6 pieces in my studio that have been there for like 3-4 years, just sitting there doing nothing, and they're just not. I'm not interested in working on them anymore. I'm not even. I look at them and I say like, oh, maybe I could change that. Nah,
Yeah.
let it go.
Yeah.
And eventually I'll just rip the canvas off. I'll keep the stretcher for sure, and I'll put on some new a new canvas and go at it again.
I scream it, and I don't know if Susan has heard me. I hope the staff hasn't heard me, but because I'm not over here committing acts of abuse or anything. I scream at my work because the thing about my creative process is it tells me where to go despite me already having the roadmap. I'm like, okay, I'm going to sit down, you're going to be this, and you're going to do this. And I'm having conversations with my work. I'm calling my sculptures names because they typically go in the direction that they want.
Right.
So
absolutely,
it makes it doubly hard to finish, because if you were making a sculpture that's a reinterpretation of Venus de Milo, but it wants to be this over here, I haven't found a way to overpower my work. I always get overpowered by my work. So for me personally, it usually decides whether it's finished for me. Right. And when I'm left to my own devices to finish a work, when my work doesn't say anything to me, guess what happens? I can't finish it.
Yeah. And I think that's okay. We learn to live with that.
Oh yeah, and
our own self-rejection or our own praises. We're the best judge of what we think is good for us. And
I think we can interfere with the actual journey and trajectory and destiny of a piece of art by overworking it and not letting it do what it was meant to do.
That's right.
So
and that comes from experience. That comes from doing it over and over again and learning to, accept or let go.
have you ever had a role as a mentor for young artists? Do artists come to you?
The only what I've created in Montreal, besides my studio, is that I've created a rental gallery. So this is a space that is that I created for other artists to come and rent out and have exhibitions, usually on a weekly basis. Now I do get a lot of artists that are not experienced in, for instance, hanging work, aesthetically pleasing to the eye, or just putting work on the walls and how best it looks. And besides those conversations, so when they come in, if it's a young artist and they're exhibiting and they don't really know how to, put work up and blah blah blah. So I mean that's everything from the hook that they use to the wiring to every little aspect, labels. You know, I remind them, did you make labels? Oh, I didn't make labels. You know, did you make a list of your paintings? Oh, I forgot to do that. So there's 1,000 little things that they should be doing, which they don't.
Now, it's funny because we talked about finishing, but there's finishing the vision,
Yeah.
and then there's finishing work to where it is complete.
Yeah.
The business. We're getting into the business part of the presentation.
Because when you're presenting artwork, no matter where it is, especially if you're doing it on your own, you have to make sure you check all the little boxes, you know, all the nuances, you know, which is the labels, the pricing. You know, are your prices too high? You know, why are you charging this much for a piece that, you know, you've only been doing art for 2 years, shouldn't be charging $8,000 for a piece of art. You know what I mean? It's.
Did you ever hear that artist? He was asked. I can't remember the guy's name, but he was asked, "Why are you?" I don't know that it wasn't Picasso. I can't remember who this was, but it was one of the coolest answers in the world. Why are you charging this much for a painting? And he said, because it's millions of years old.
That's right.
And they were like, it's not. Well, until I did it.
Yeah.
It hadn't existed.
Yeah, it's the thought, it's the application, it's the time that you spent. You know, people ask me a lot of times, how long did it take you to do this piece?
Yeah.
And I said, well, I'm up to like 2 years because the way I work, because I work in oil as well, you know, when I'm putting tape down, I do a section, and then that section takes at least 2 months, 2 weeks to dry.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to sit and stare at paint drying. So I have to come up with a lot of other ones, and I could work on them at the same time, you know. So I don't really know time-wise how long something takes to make, you know. So that question is always very hard to answer. But that's it, you know. I mean, it's all the time you spend sketching and thinking and running here and looking, you know, all of it has to come into play when it comes to pricing your work. And obviously, the more experienced you are and the more sought after you are as an artist, obviously you're going to charge more for your work because it becomes more scarce because more people have it. So at that point, you're thinking like, okay, you know, I'm creating a piece, it's going out the door right away. You know, I mean, yeah, it's that. And then you get into the into that little thing that, oh, you know, people love that I do these minimalist paintings. So you're kind of stuck doing these minimalist paintings.
Oh yeah, it's easy to get typecast.
Oh yeah, for sure. And one thing an artist is not like is that, because it just stifles their creativity because they're just churning out work.
Well, and making art is like breathing. You know, I told one of my students, I worked with kids in a life skill arts program, and they were asking about being an artist. And I told the kid, I said, well, I want you to hold your breath. So the kid holds the breath, and I need to breathe.
Yeah.
And I said, okay, is it uncomfortable? Yes, it's uncomfortable. I need to breathe. I said, exhale. I said, when I can't make art, that's what I feel like. I feel exactly like that. Okay. So if you want to understand the artist experience, it goes along those lines. You know, so, you know, here we are, our profession.
Along these lines.
Somewhere along these lines, you know, it's a business, but it's also, you know, you have to inhale and exhale. You don't get to, then, you know, you suffer a certain kind of death as an artist. Your personal path.
Sure.
As far as, you know, because we real briefly, we touched on, you know, how, you know, maybe family was not necessarily as supportive. Well, as you were navigating it and you knew that it was going to become more and more a part of your life, was there any sense of isolation that you felt as you were like, okay, I'm kind of understanding that this is what I am and this is what I do, or did you find support reasonably?
I found more support later on.
Okay.
You know, with my wife. She was very supportive of me spending time in the studio and just my vision of being an artist. You know, she it was kind of like, I'm going to the studio. Okay, honey, no problem. You know what I mean? And that was like, oh, okay. Oh, you mean I could actually go to the studio?
Yeah.
Great. So in that way, that was her support to me, and, showing up, helping me out when I have a show, helping serve wine and all the rest of that. So, in that way, that was very supportive. But it took a long time, I think, for you to admit that you are an artist.
That was going to be my next question. When did you admit to yourself that you were an artist?
My God. I think when I first started painting in my little apartment, on the floor, wherever I found, experimenting with color and paint and surface and all that. And then I decided that in order to be thought of more as of a professional artist, that I would have to rent a studio. So that's what I did. I rented a little space, and it was almost like you took, you started to breathe,
Yeah.
I was able to go to this place. It was my little sanctuary, you could say, away from my wife and kids, which, not in a good way, not in a bad way, but...
Well, it's the same concept as the man cave. It's not that you don't love your wife and kids.
As you just like, as I think as artists like to spend a little bit of time with themselves, thinking and thoughts and whatever.
I think you almost have to as an artist, because you have that one foot in the realm of creativity and the other in the practical world.
We need to shut off the noise, because the world is very noisy. I mean, I know for myself, I need to, shut down or get away from all that noise.
Yeah.
And when I rented this little space, it was absolutely amazing. I hey, this is my studio. Wow, I have a studio. You know what I mean? It was just like, mind-boggling to me that I have a studio, but I made it happen. So, I think when you're meant to be something, no matter what you do, you're just going to be that thing, and that's it. I mean,
you're right. And people get in the way of certain destinies. It's like, why do I keep getting steered back over here?
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, there's a reason that you keep getting steered back over here. Now quit fighting the steering wheel.
Exactly.
And
it's all
go.
little signs, even that God tells you. I remember I moved into, I bought a house with my family, and we moved in, and the name of the street was called Cesar Cote. So the real estate agent says, do you know who Cesar Cote was? And I said, no, not really. And this is when I was struggling between, what am I doing? Am I going to be an artist? Am I not going to, where's my life path going? And she said, he's a Canadian artist, world famous, Canadian, Montreal, Quebec artist. And I was like, okay, if that's not a sign, I don't know what is. You know what I mean? So though you have to learn to accept the signs that are out there, and keep moving forward.
You know what? And I think it's beautiful that your wife, it was and is one of your biggest supporters. I think one of the things that I struggle with, as far as listening to friends talk, is because as a guy, you want to give them something that will fix the situation. And a lot of times they vent about the human condition. And sometimes it's unfair to explain to a person something that only a creative mind is going to understand. And you get real frustrated with them. And was there ever a time, and you don't have to answer this if you don't want to, that your wife got confused as to what you want to do? It's like, okay, well, he's a creative, but he's going into business doing this, but he's a creative, and they're two different rules. And a lot of times as artists, it seems like we're neglecting one or the other because of the world that we're dwelling in at that particular time. Has she ever wondered, Demetrios, what are you doing?
No, I don't think so. I think she knows. She's pretty much. She pretty much knows that this is my life path. This is
so she just accepted what she just came with the package.
That's right.
In total. Yeah. Those people are special. I did a podcast about building positive support circles.
Yeah.
And I think all of us as artists have had that one moment that was a little darker than the rest. You know, it doesn't have to be dramatic, but that catalyst that either makes you commit to being an artist.
Yeah.
I don't think you ever stop being an artist. I think you commit to one or the other, the practical or not, which is why we have a lot of real estate agents that are really artists. Was there ever that defining moment to where you said the commitment is made? I am going to be an artist. Like that day you were sitting there, whether you're driving in your car.
Yeah. Well, like I said earlier, I was working in the family business.
And that was that pivotal moment.
And then my parents were basically out of the business because they were kind of like semi-retired. They said, okay, Demetrios, you got this, take care of it. But I always had, especially when I started painting seriously at 40 years old. Okay.
Oh, so you were late. You were a little late getting started.
A little late. Yeah. That's been my motto in life, is like everything's late. I'm late to everything, you know? So when they gave me the business, I worked the business, but on the back of my mind, I was always thinking, I got to get out of this business because I want to paint.
Yeah.
I want to create. I want to make a life based around art in some way.
Were they disappointed when you said, "Hey, look, I'm an artist and I'm the family business"?
No, I mean, I was at it for 35 years, and
Okay.
and I just kind of felt like I've given enough to this.
Okay.
That's it. I've given enough, and I want the rest of the time of my time on Earth to be something that I want to do. And
I can completely understand that.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And whether it I always say this. I say I want my kids to remember me, maybe as someone who took chances.
Yeah.
And someone that really took the path that they wanted to take and stayed on it. And I want my kids to be inspired by that, but to not be a number in a company or whatever, to carve their own paths. Yeah, you know, and I think it's important to show that to your family, to your kids, and also to believe it and to live by that.
I think legacy is important. I've got a 13-year-old, and you know, she was showing signs of creativity.
Right.
And I hate admitting this, but I'm like, wait a minute, why don't you go ahead and become an accountant? Go ahead but there's something about legacy, and legacy really doesn't have anything to do with money.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, you've got that legacy that you want to leave for your family, but particularly your kids. Yeah. And it's timeless. We're still talking about the works, love them or dislike them, of Picasso and all these historic figures that are no longer here. And you know, the idea of creating something that lasts that long, even if nobody knows anything about it except, you know, for my, you know, the handful of loved ones that I have in my family. I've got a small family.
Right.
There's something about being able to go on through that they can hold on to.
Yeah.
And the idea of legacy is for me personally, is very important.
Yeah, for sure. I think it is. It's one of the, I mean, our kids look to us for influence, for inspiration. We're the first people that they see, and then you know, obviously throughout life they get inspired by others and other things. So I think it is important to show them that, you know, you are who you really are, and not some, you know, I don't know, lost soul or something. I don't know. You know what I'm saying? Like,
I do.
We oftentimes get into these, you know, kind of, I don't know what you call it, this stagnant life that, you know, you really don't want to be a part of, but you feel like you're stuck, you know, like, oh, I have to do this. Oh no, I can't really do what I want.
It's like creating a legacy of mundaneness. Yeah. You know, even if you are in a Fortune 500 company.
I mean, I know lawyers that left the practice to be artists.
Yeah.
You know, and that's a big ask. That's like, you know, and I remember them struggling and saying, oh, could I, should I, would I? And then once they do it, they're like, no looking back. Yeah. You know, It's always the case.
There's a big difference between existing and living.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yes. Do you think, you talked about the second half of your life and what you're wanting for that. That because obviously, the older you get, you have, and the closer you get to that midway point, you have more life behind you than in front of you. That probably contributes to a certain urgency. Not that we're dying, or anything like that. You're a fairly young guy still, in the realm of art.
Yeah.
If we're athletes, we probably were not going to be professional athletes. But to be able to enjoy creating, it's a very finite amount of time, that we're going to be healthy enough to do that.
Right.
Be healthy enough to do other things. But, there's a certain zest for life I think artists have. And I think just listening to what you've told me, that second half and starting at 40, you're seeing the world in all these, in different shades of what it is now as opposed to it being, what it was. So I think that's pretty interesting. Demetrios, how long are you going to be in town?
I will be here till,
excuse me.
I'm leaving early Saturday morning, so I'm here till tomorrow. Actually.
Okay. Well, I am hoping to get by for the event, and man, this has been a great talk.
Thank you. I appreciate your time and helping me get through this.
It was great. Anytime I get a chance to talk with a fellow creative, it's a gift and a treat for me.
Yeah, I always look out for to have friends that hey, let's come by the studio. We just ramble on and on for hours and hours about every little aspect. And actually, when I get back home, I'm starting a small little artist get together at least once a month, where we just chit chat about our process. What are you up to? What have you been at? What are you doing with your work? What are you doing? Oh, you know what? I found it. And there's always a connection.
Yeah.
You always get like, hey, you know what? I found this gallery and blah, blah, blah. And da. Oh yeah, you should apply there too. And then like, oh, okay. So, it's helping each other.
Well, that's that creative family that we were alluding to, that extra.
Yeah.
So this has been good. I am here with Demetrios Papakostas, Canadian artist, abstract artist. If you have the chance, come out to 1515 Lincoln Gallery and see his work, talk with him about his process. That exhibition is going to be November 9th. And
until December 16th.
Until December 16th. So you have time.
But not really.
Try to get out for that reception. There's going to be...
It goes quickly.
It does. There's a lot of good energy at those receptions.
Oh, yeah.
And they're a lot of fun.
Yeah.
So this is Nathan Lee for Life is Art. And until the next time, take care. And I'll be sure to leave additional information in the links so you can learn more about what Demetrios does. Everybody take care.